Welcome back to Flicks with Daddy. We're back for our third book in horror month, even though I read horror books all year round. But today I'll be reviewing my first Stephen King horror book. I've read Mr. Mercedes, but that, while definitely having horrific moments, was more, cop thriller type of book. Whereas Revival, I would consider falls more into the horror landscape. So this will be a spoiler-free review. Let's get into it. Revival follows a man named Jamie Morton, who at a young age is introduced to a new preacher in his small town named Charlie Jacobs. And we soon see that Jacobs has a thing for electricity. And this book really is about the lifelong connection between Jamie, who again meets Reverend Jacobs, I believe when he's 12 or 13, and they share a close bond throughout the rest of their lives. And this book spans a long time, 5 decades. And so, as you can imagine, there is quite the connection between Jamie and Reverend Jacobs. So, I think the first place that I need to start with this is, now I really enjoyed the book, but we'll get to that later. But this is a slow burn. I can't remember how many pages the book was. I want to say like 500, but that might be a little bit long. But either way, if you are not into slow burn books, where, like I said, this book takes place over 5 decades, then I don't think you're going to like Revival. But if you don't mind that aspect of a book and you enjoy kind of a slow unraveling of the story, then Revival might be a great horror book for you. The characters in this book were very interesting. Namely, Jamie Morton, who I would say is the main character, and Reverend Charlie Jacobs. Jamie is a flawed, or at least becomes a very flawed, but never particularly offensive human, at least from his perspective. Because this book is it's written in a way that it's like Jamie is actually writing the book, or writing a book about, what's happened. Now, he definitely does touch on bad things that he's did, and he doesn't paint himself as, some perfect character or anything. But the other character that, we get to know the most is Reverend Jacobs. And he was just a fascinating character to me. I don't really want to touch too much more on Jacobs, because I feel like I cannot talk about the character and do the character justice without getting into some spoilery stuff. And I'd rather just err on the side of caution with that. But he was a very interesting character, and the bond, I'll call it, that he shares with Jamie, their bond grew, and it transformed throughout the book into different types of bonds or different types of connections. And it was just, again, it was a slow burn as this happened. But things were always kind of moving. So I've been saying that this book is a slow burn, but is the destination worth that journey? Because a book can be a slow burn and be, never pick up or never get to a satisfying climax, right? It just kind of burns a little bit and then just dies out. This book definitely has a climactic ending. It was a very interesting ending. It was a very thought-provoking ending. There were a few things that happened that didn't make a lot of sense to me, but for this genre, I think this book kept its ducks in a row for the most part, as far as things making sense within the context of the story. This book, I said it, I think it's a horror book, but it's not, it's a horror book, but in a lot of ways it's a psychological horror, to be exact. And like I said, the ending, and even throughout the whole book, it really kind of makes you think and face, you know, things that we humans face: addiction, relationships, death. All these kinds of types of things are a part of what happens in this book in a way that is really thought provoking. So I really enjoyed this book. I'm going to give this book a 7.4. As I said before, I don't mind slow burns. In fact, I really like slow burns, but I would have liked to have a bit longer of a climax, if that makes sense. Everything slow, 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 and then everything kind of boom, boom, just happens all at once, which was exciting. But, I wanted a little bit more. This certainly gets me interested, as if I wasn't already, in some other of Stephen King's books. And I'm reading Salem's Lot right now, so that'll be the next little book in October. And I'm really enjoying that one. Let me know what your thoughts on Revival were. I think it was pretty, from my understanding, pretty polarizing for Stephen King readers. Kind of why I chose it. But let me know what you thought of the book. And if you could like and subscribe, I'd appreciate that. And I hope to see you back soon.